After taking 69 rides in the Tesla Robotaxi, I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of its strengths and weaknesses because I didn't fly all the way out to Austin just to take a few rides. I wanted to put it through a proper stress test and treated it like I do with any new version of full self-driving, trying to find the most challenging routes possible and also doing my best to find areas where it struggles. For science, of course. And I was successful in this endeavor. In fact, I even managed to get an entire pickup and drop-off location temporarily banned from the Robotaxi app, which is a badge that I wear with honor. I managed to pull a few sneaky experiments as well that, in my opinion, basically confirmed some of the theories I had in my first Robotaxi video regarding the technology behind it, which you may find pretty surprising and I haven't heard talked about anywhere else yet. And I also may have seen a thing or two that I probably wasn't supposed to see. Also need to apologize that it's taken me so long to get this video out. I've had to sort through well over 30 hours of footage that's been extremely difficult for me to summarize. The entire experience was just very surreal and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I mean, the majority of the time I was riding around with a LiDAR salesman. You really can't make this stuff up. Let's just say there wasn't a ton of conversation during our rides together. I'm just kidding. David, if you're watching this, it was a pleasure having you along and it was awesome to be able to share the experience with a new friend. Let's jump right in. I gotta say, the overall Robotaxi experience was a lot more polished than I expected in many areas, one of the most impressive of which was the pickup and drop-off adjustments it was able to do on the fly. In this example, I'm purposely blocking it from entering the court where I asked it to pick me up from, but instead of getting stuck in the middle of the street like I kind of expected it to be honest, you can see it kind of just accepts that it's not going to be able to get into this court and adjust its pickup location on the fly to the next nearest point, which was right outside of the court. This may seem pretty mundane, but I think it's a sign of some real intelligence going on here. Here's another example where I asked it to pick me up on a street that had no parking just to see if it would double park along these cars or what would happen, and it's already past the pickup location that I requested, but continues driving slowly down the street and actually continues all the way on up until the end over there where it has a place where it can pull over and not block traffic. You can kind of see it park in the background there, and that's where it actually waits for me. And sorry about the video, I got a little distracted by this monstrosity. The reason I think the whole adjusting on the fly thing is pretty impressive is that this is something that current autonomous cars have a real problem with. They seem to stop in some pretty bad locations and don't care about blocking traffic, where the Robotaxi actually feels like it's really considering the flow of traffic and tries its best to find a spot to get out of the way. The biggest testament I can say to this is that I had a bunch of camera gear that I had to set up and take down at the beginning and end of every ride, and it never put me in a situation where I felt like I was in the way or I couldn't take an extra second to get all my camera gear either set up or pack it away. And I know I give other autonomous cars crap about this, but let's be real, humans are the worst offenders and stuff like this. Like this rideshare person stopping in just the middle of the street. Even though there was plenty of places he could have pulled over to drop off this passenger, he just stops directly in the middle of the street to let him go. Also pretty interesting watching the Robotaxi kind of think through this situation. You saw it kind of went for a pass until the door opened up. So really interesting stuff here. But yeah, definitely a pretty terrible and dangerous drop-off location by that human. There was also some pretty random things I'm surprised they thought about. For example, if you leave the windows rolled down, it uses the rear seat occupancy sensor to know when you leave and automatically rolls them back up. But if you roll them down again after that, they stay rolled down until the next passenger. Didn't expect people to be that dumb now, did you, Tesla? And speaking of being dumb, I also discovered that the driver's door is also unlocked on the Robotaxi, which kind of surprised me, and it doesn't seem like the Robotaxi account was very thrilled with this either. Realistically, all of those things can probably be fixed with a software update, but had to try it. Another thing I decided to test was what would happen if you fell asleep in the back of a Robotaxi and didn't get out at the destination. But before I show you the results, I do have to add some context. You see, I am a terrible passenger. I am usually very uncomfortable when somebody else is driving me around that I don't know, especially when they have a lot of distractions. Like this Uber Uber driver who picked me up from the airport with a tablet and 2 phones around him. I just know how inherently dangerous driving is and have a hard time sitting back and relaxing when I'm not in control. I know a lot of you are probably the same. But something pretty amazing happened on the 3rd day of testing nonstop. I hadn't gotten a great night's sleep the night before and actually fell asleep during one of the rides. And I'm not saying I completely passed out or anything. It was more like a quick micro nap where I was just surprised to be closer to the destination than I thought. But I'll tell you, it takes a lot of trust from my side for that to happen. And that's the thing with Robotaxi. There is no roll of the dice of driver skill every time you get into one. Every car has the exact same driver that I feel like I've gotten to know and trust more and more over the years. I don't feel like I need to look over its shoulder to make sure it's not distracted, and definitely don't need to wonder if it's under the influence or anything like that, which is not something I really thought about much before, but after dozing off during a ride, it really did get me thinking. And not only that, it's become an extremely good driver that's able to predict some scenarios before they happen better than the majority of human drivers, I'd say. For example, watch here as the car in front of the Waymo starts slowing down, Robotaxi preemptively slows down as well, almost as if it's expecting the Waymo to cut into our lane, which is likely based off of the videos it's been trained on of human drivers cutting in like that. Or like this example where we're driving along and a truck kind of pulls out in front of us a little bit, then slows down because he's trying to get all the way into this left-hand lane, and then there's an object in the road that the Robotaxi has to go around. All of this was handled so smoothly that David, who was sitting in the back next to me, didn't even look up from his phone. He didn't even know anything had happened. And there was so many examples of it smoothly controlling for things that I didn't even notice, like this human suddenly merging into our lane, or like here, where it's getting around all this chaos leading into this parking lot on our right-hand side, and for a moment it looks like there's a truck that might be pulling into our path, and you can feel it slow down just a little bit to let you know that it saw what's going on but doesn't overreact. It really does feel like it understands the intention of human drivers. And I know those probably seem like little things, but it's a combination of all these little things coming together and seeing how it reacts to all these things that make me kind of lean back and feel like, okay, it's got this. So there's the context around why I decided to do this sleep test, because I did accidentally have a little nap inside of a Robotaxi and genuinely wanted to see what would happen if somebody was completely passed out. The one thing that does make this a little bit awkward is the safety monitor in the passenger seat, but I don't think they want to be even noticed at all. I think the whole idea is that you pretend like they're not even there. So that's exactly what I did. And I just sat in the back seat pretending like I was asleep, and he didn't say a single thing. Then after 2 minutes of waiting, this happened.
Hello, this is Tesla Robotaxi support. We see that you've reached your final pin destination and see that you have not exited the vehicle. We were just wondering if everything was alright.
Oh yeah, sorry man, I fell asleep. Thank you so much.
No, that's perfectly alright. We'd like to thank you for riding with us today, and you hope you have a great day.
Thank you. So yeah, turns out they thought about that. I do have some thoughts about the safety monitors on why they're currently there and when we could possibly see them being removed, along with a few pretty revealing experiments that we're going to get into right after I tell you about this video's sponsor. I'm going to tell you a true story about Delete Me. When we first agreed to the partnership and they created the link for my channel that gives you the 20% discount, I noticed that part of my name was missing, the AI of AI driver. So I asked them if they could add it back in, and surprisingly, they said, no, we're going to keep it this way. And while that was a bit surprising, I got to admit I have to respect their dedication to keeping things deleted. So far, Delete Me has completely removed my personal information from 84 data broker websites, which has resulted in a noticeable decrease in spam phone calls, texts, and emails. They do this by kind of flipping the script on these data brokers who collect and share your data and instead spam them with legal letters on your behalf to remove you from their databases, which I think is just incredible. It's awesome seeing the reports come in showing which databases you've been deleted from, and also not only which ones still have some information about you, but also what specific information they have and what part of the removal process they're in. Using my special half deleted link or the QR code on the screen, you can get 20% off all their consumer plans, which is a pretty great deal. Thanks again to Delete Me for sponsoring this video and making it possible to drop everything I was doing to be able to fly to Texas and stress test Robotaxi. Although it is very exciting that the launch of Robotaxi means that full self-driving has progressed to the point of being driverless, we do have to address the elephant in the room, and that is that it is still very much a supervised system with the safety monitor sitting in the passenger seat. And somebody asked me, would I still feel safe if the safety monitor wasn't there? And the answer to that is yes, because even when it was making mistakes in the drives, it was never putting me into a dangerous situation, but I can definitely understand why they're there. Tesla obviously says that they're there because they want to roll this out as safely as they possibly can, which I totally understand. But I also think another big reason is that my prediction about this being just a better version of version 13 is actually correct. I am near 100% certain now. My first clue about that was this clip from my day one Robotaxi video where it refused to pull into this driveway and showed it as undrivable space. You can kind of see the full self-driving visualizations there, showing it as like a curb or something, even though the front bumper camera was showing a clear shot into the driveway. At first, I thought that it could be that it was just misinterpreting what it was seeing from the front bumper camera, but there kept being these moments where it seemed to have a bit of trouble judging distance to the front of the car. The front camera should be able to clearly see that there is plenty of room to squeeze by this car, and yet it seems like it struggles. And there is no better example than this one, where after the Robotaxi dropped us off, there was a person who pulled in front of it and behind it, which got it a little bit stuck in this situation here, which doesn't seem like much of a situation it should have problems with, but you can see it doesn't feel confident enough to just turn its wheels and get out of here, even though it has plenty of clearance in the front of the car. And it's not only the clearance to the front of the car that's the issue here, it's also a bit of the behavior. It's just not turning the wheels like it should. Like, have you ever been in a parking lot and see somebody really struggle with parking? They're just not turning the steering wheel the right way and you just want to walk over there and do it for them. Like, there was no joke about a minute and a half of the car just pulling forward and backward and not turning the steering wheel like it should to be able to easily get out of here. It's just so funny how competent the car feels in many areas of driving, and watching it struggle in pretty simple situations like that one. But to be fair, there are times where even some of the best drivers on earth seem to struggle with this one as well. How embarrassing. Anyways, to figure out if it was using the front bumper camera once and for all, I decided to put my carry-on directly in front of the car, where the front bumper camera should have a very clear view. And you can see as soon as the hazards turn off here, it does a lurch forward before stopping again and turning back on the hazards. Now, with the hazards turning on again, my thinking is that it was the safety monitor who actually stopped the car from moving forward. I don't think it stopped by itself. And in this example, I did make it pretty clear to the safety monitor that I was leaving the carry-on in front of the car. You can see I also kind of moved it back a little bit to give it a little bit better of a chance, but you can see the hazards remain on here, and the safety monitor doesn't seem to let the car go again. I even wait here a little bit longer, but I can only handle so much pain, so eventually I just moved the carry-on so that he could get on his way. The next time I tried, I was sneaky though, and purposely put it in front of the car without the safety monitor seeing, because it is a blind spot for him too, and I think that pretty much confirms my theory about the front camera not being used. On the off chance that the safety monitor that I pulled that experiment on is watching, I wanted to personally apologize to you, but I had to know for sure. Please don't ban me from Robotaxi. Something else interesting about that clip is if you listen closely, you can hear the passenger door open and close. That pretty much confirms my other theory I had in the first video about this button being used as an emergency stop. It does make a lot of sense. It's very easily accessible by them, and probably the reason they're always around this button. I don't know what this guy's doing here, but yeah, he loves this button. So what I think all of this means is that the theory I had on my first video about this just being a better version of version 13 and not using the front bumper camera is likely correct, which also means that it has some issues that version 13 currently does. Like here, for example, where it's getting into the right-hand turn lane too early. This turns into a right only, and we need to go straight through this intersection. You can kind of see it correct itself at the last moment here. Got pretty lucky there was a gap there. And there's other very familiar earlier issues like some random unnecessary lane changes. Like you can see we have a right turn coming up, and for some reason the car wanted to get into the left-hand lane and then has to get right back over to the right-hand lane where we started with, which doesn't happen very often, but is still something that happens on my personal car as well. And here is another example of the same kind of lane change confusion going on, except this time it's for a upcoming left turn and the car suddenly wants to get into the right-hand lane for some reason before having to dart back over. And there is a few different ways that you could look at this. I can definitely see the argument for people saying it's not a good thing, that this is basically just an improved version of version 13. But I actually take it as a positive, because although I doubt that the safety drivers will be removed until at least it starts using the front bumper camera, I think that this means that the version of full self-driving that Robotaxi is running will be able to run on all cars, including Model Ys like mine that don't have the front bumper camera. At least if you're on Hardware 4. Sorry, Hardware 3, but don't worry, it seems like Hardware 4 is about to be out of date by next year anyways. And before we get any deeper into the weeds here, I want to make sure we don't have a situation where we're missing the forest for the trees, because my experience with Robotaxi pretty much proved to me that Hardware 4 is all that is going to be needed to be unsupervised and driverless. I don't think not having that front bumper camera is quite as big of a deal as people make it out to be. If you remember, some early versions of actually Smart Summon would actually reverse slightly before moving forward to make sure there was nothing in front of the car. And while that solution wasn't exactly elegant, it is still a solution, and it really only matters at the very beginning of drives. And don't get me wrong, there are some scenarios where I think it could be handy, like for example when we were pulling into that driveway and it saw it was open and the other camera didn't, or here where, you know, it kind of has to creep out and look for some slower moving traffic, but in no way do I think is an absolute deal breaker. I think that Robotaxis can exist without the front bumper camera. Proof of this, I think, is that, well, Robotaxi isn't using the front bumper camera, and it sure feels pretty close to being unsupervised to me. And I could be wrong about that, and retrofits may be required for unsupervised, but I doubt it. I mean, humans have that exact same blind spot, and they're allowed to be on the road. I think what's far more important is its overall behavior and how it interprets road users and pedestrians and all these other things, because currently that's kind of where other self-driving cars kind of fall apart, is they end up being a nuisance on the road because they don't do what people are expecting. They do things very robotically, but I don't think there was a single time where it didn't do exactly what everybody around it expected it to do, which is really saying something. In fact, one of the most surprising things to me while riding in the Robotaxi was, even though it has white seats, there were not very many people who even noticed that nobody was behind the wheel, because the vast majority of the time it does exactly what everybody else around it expects it to do with confidence. One of the major benefits of being trained off human driving data. Another example of its kind of human touch is here, where my buddy David is in the Cybertruck there, and his only goal was to annoy the Robotaxi as much as he possibly could. And I didn't put him up to this, so Tesla, again, please don't ban me. You can see him up there kind of slowing down for no reason in front of the Robotaxi, acting like he's pulling over, and even though we have a right turn shortly, it does decide to go around him because he was going far below the speed limit. And this is where things get pretty interesting. You can see it has its right turn signal on for this right turn coming up, but he's putting his truck in a place where it doesn't feel comfortable making the lane changes. And surprisingly, it actually starts accelerating and speeding a little bit to get in front of him, but when even that doesn't work, it changes its method and then decides to start slowing down pretty dramatically, coming to basically a full crawl before the corner here to get into the right-hand lane, to the point where he didn't feel comfortable messing with it anymore without disrupting the flow of traffic. And I mean, what else can you ask for? In my opinion, handled absolutely perfectly. There's a few more things that it seems a lot better at than current versions of full self-driving, and one of them is rerouting when necessary. Like you can see the exit to this parking lot is blocked off for some reason, but without any hesitation, it just finds a new way out of the parking lot. And an even better example here, where the navigation has us making a left turn out of this parking lot, followed by another immediate left at the light, but you may be able to see that the left-hand turn lane is pretty backed up. and it doesn't look like we're going to be able to fit in there without doing some crazy stuff. But instead of waiting here, it decides just to make a right-hand turn and go around the block instead, which was just absolutely awesome. It did it even before it changed the navigation route. Really, really cool. I do have quite the collection of clips of moments where it impressed me, like here where it kind of helps out this driver that got put into a really bad situation by this van. I know this van thinks he was being polite, but they call that a dead man's left for a reason. He put that driver in danger, and if you do stuff like that, please don't. But anyways, I don't need to tell you how impressive full self-driving has gotten at stuff like that. So instead, let's move on to the rain. And seeing how current versions of full self-driving really don't like driving in the rain, I wasn't expecting much, but oh my god, the Tesla AI team cooked. There were moments like this one where I legitimately could not believe what I was seeing. I could not believe the car was driving it confidently as smoothly as it was here without asking for help a single time. The Tesla AI team said that they did a lot of testing on hydroplaning and against heavy rain, which definitely showed. I know the videos probably don't do it justice. One of the main comments I got when posting some of these clips was like, oh, why are the wipers even on? That's not real rain. But trust me, the rain out here was biblical. A lot of streets were completely flooded, and to be honest, I'm surprised they kept the Robotaxi service going on for as long as they did through this weather, because it was wild. If anything, seeing how well it reacted in these situations almost made me a little bit frustrated with the current version of full self-driving on my car that seems to give up at the first hint of rain and slows down and kind of tells me to take over. But at least I know now that the hardware is indeed very capable of driving in conditions like these. Alright, I am starting to realize just how long this video is getting, and I didn't intend for it to be that way. I just have so much to share with you. But anyways, I wanted to share with you a few more oopsie moments that happened during my rides. This one is right on the edge of the geofence, and I discovered that you can navigate to places a little bit outside and it'll just drop you off at the very edge. So this is at the very edge of the geofence, and you can see it decides to drop us off at this Popeyes, even though my destination that I picked was a little bit further, and it pulls up along this curb, which was probably a fine place to temporarily stop to drop off passengers. But after we got out of the car, it actually turned right here, which made it start going through the drive-thru, which was where this clip came from the beginning of the video. And it did stop just short of going through the drive-thru backwards, even though it technically could have because there was no cars in the drive-thru. It did stop and then did a slow reverse of shame here. But the big question is it doing it by itself, or is it being remote operated and manually backed out? And I was actually leaning towards it being remote operated because my full self-driving, it basically just tries to do a multiple point turn immediately. It'll never just back up consistently all the way back like that. It'll always try to do like a 6 or 7 point turn to get itself straightened out. And this one went all the way back. So, you know me, I had to call another car to the exact same spot and see if it would happen again. So here we are just a few minutes later, getting picked up from the exact same spot that it had trouble with, and again, it turns right and starts going backwards through the drive-thru. And you can kind of see the safety monitor's hand come up for a moment, almost like he wanted to hit that stop in lane button, but he doesn't, and the car seems to understand by itself that it is backwards through a drive-thru and does the slow reverse of shame all by itself. And I know there's going to be some people who are adamant that it shouldn't have made this mistake in the first place, but let's be real, autonomous cars are going to make mistakes like this. The much more important thing is how it handles them after and gets itself out of them. And this was honestly, again, handled perfectly. And very interestingly, I did come back to this same spot another 6 or 7 times because, you know, any location that I find it struggling, I have to bring it back as much as possible. But the car never made the same mistake again. You can see in this example, it just ended up doing a complete 3-point turn and turning itself around. And in other attempts, it seemed to just pick an entirely new location to drop us off. Instead of parking along that red curb, sometimes it would go up to the parking area that's directly in front of us, and this time it's decided to drop us off right to the right over here. We never never could make it do that same mistake again. And I do have a theory about this. I don't think that it's full self-driving getting better between updates. I think the more logical theory is one of two things. One is that there is some randomness to where it decides to pick you up and drop you off and the decisions it makes afterwards, which I think is very, very likely. That is a byproduct of neural network. The clips I'm showing you now are a perfect example of that. You saw it did a 3-point turn to avoid all the standing water in this parking lot, but the attempts after that, it had absolutely no problem at all driving right through the water, which I thought was pretty impressive, by the way. I think it's pretty cool how it still seems to understand where all the curbs are, even though they're completely underwater. But there is another option of what could have caused that behavior. I found out that they can manually mark areas within the geofence as areas to not allow the car to drive. So in this situation, we're just getting picked up from the hotel and the car's going to have to drive through the water like it normally does. But this time, the safety monitor stops the car and presses the stop in lane button. You can see the hazards immediately turn on and then the Robotaxi come to a stop. And to be honest, I didn't even notice the safety driver doing this. I had thought the car stopped all by itself, which kind of explains my conversation with remote support.
Tesla Robotaxi support. Oh.
Hello, the car stopped right before a puddle here. It's made it through this puddle before, but for some reason it stopped this time and the hazards are on.
Okay, I see that. Let me see what I can do to get that fixed for you. Give me a quick moment.
Thanks.
So remote support told me to just hang tight real quick, which ended up being quite a long time. I don't know if you noticed, but his voice was kind of choppy as it was coming over the speakers of the car, and I believe they were having some technical difficulties connecting to it. We ended up staying here for quite a while. This is 8x fast forward, so we were probably sitting here with no communication from anybody for at least 2 or 3 minutes, wondering like what the heck is going on. But unfortunately, even after a really long wait, it didn't seem like remote support could help very much.
Hello, are y'all able to hear me?
Yep.
I'm having some technical difficulties on my side trying to help y'all out, so could the safety driver do me a favor and help correct the go?
Okay. So yeah, basically, I guess we're having some technical difficulties connecting. I don't know if you guys would prefer that I recover the vehicle and drive you, or we can just get you another one. We can just order it again.
Oh, well,
If you want to just, we can just cancel the ride, pick you up again right here.
okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
And as tempting as it was to get a video of the safety monitor crawling into the driver's seat and completing the trip, because I'm pretty sure that would have been a pretty viral video, I don't think it helps Tesla very much figure out these issues. Like, the entire reason I'm here is to expose issues like these. So I did decide to just book another trip instead and try to let them figure this one out by themselves. But of course I had to film the whole thing to see if they actually could figure this one out for themselves and didn't have to get the safety monitor into the driver's seat. After a few more minutes of waiting though, they did end up getting it figured out without the safety monitor going into the driver's seat. You can see the hazards are off. I'm not sure if it's being remote operated right now, but it does decide to go ahead and back up and choose a new way out of this parking lot. So yeah, pretty sure that's another big reason why the safety monitors are there, because they don't know what they don't know. You see, they had a real hard time connecting to the car for some reason, getting it out of there. It eventually worked, but still some issues. And by the way, David mapped this out and figured out that it was a total length of 220 feet, which I think might be the shortest Robotaxi ride ever. Elon, if you're watching, I want my $4.20 back. And funny enough, the next time we got picked up by the very next Robotaxi, it decided to go the exact same direction as the other one did, which again, it doesn't always do. Sometimes it decides to take different routes, but this time the safety driver had no issue with letting it go through the water. But unfortunately, this was the last time that it did so, because after this entire area wasn't able to be selected as a spot to be picked up or dropped off to, which really, really sucked. But I did learn that they can manually go in and select areas to not let the car drive, which is pretty interesting. I have noticed that just like people that use full self-driving have different tolerance levels for what they're willing to let the car do, so do the safety drivers. Some of them will hit that button really fast to stop the car, and other ones will kind of let it go as long as what it's doing is safe, which, as you know, is what I prefer because it allows me to see the car thinking through difficult situations. All in all, I gotta say I have been really impressed with Robotaxi, especially since this is the very first iteration. This is the worst it's ever going to be. Although there were a few failures I was able to capture, this was over 4 days straight of non-stop testing, and that's the worst I was able to find, so I think they're doing pretty good. And in fact, the majority of the interesting moments that I found during my rides were humans doing the wrong thing. Like, you can see this person going the complete wrong way into the entrance of this parking lot. I have quite a few examples of humans thinking they can make it through while they end up running a red light, or just being in the incorrect lane and then just absolutely forcing themselves in at the last moment without any regard for anybody else, or just randomly deciding to swerve at us like this guy did, which Robotaxi was barely able to avoid. A lot of people will have you believe that full self-driving is dangerous or whatever, but the most dangerous part of Robotaxi right now is other humans on the road that are just not paying attention or doing the wrong things. In my 4 days of riding around Austin, we went by 3 separate human pilot accidents, just to kind of put things into perspective there. The one thing I would say I wish it did a better job at is avoiding known bad drivers. For example, you can see this Subaru on our left drift into our lane suddenly and then kind of just hit the brakes. They just don't seem like a very good driver. You can see them still pretty much over their lane line right now, and a good human driver knows to just start avoiding them, but full self-driving doesn't seem to understand this much and just starts treating them like a regular car again and gets caught out again here as they start drifting again closer and closer to our lane. This actually happens one more time, so it's very obvious that full self-driving does not really understand that it needs to avoid this car. And I did glance over, and this was a girl just glued to her cell phone and not really paying attention, but it would just be really nice to be able to avoid people like this altogether. I'm actually hoping that we see this improvement with the next iteration of full self-driving that's supposedly coming out at the end of next month, that supposedly has 10 times the parameters of the current version. That should give it a lot more of a memory. Anyways, sorry for the last minute rant about bad human drivers out there, but I think it's a very important point to bring up. Robotaxi doesn't have to be anywhere near perfect to be much safer than the average human driver, which is something that gets ignored by a lot of people. Yes, it would be great if it never made any mistakes and was absolutely perfect, but that's not really realistic, especially when it's sharing the road with humans. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I think the much more important thing to focus on is how it deals with the randomness that happens while driving. And so far, based on my testing, it is doing extremely well in that regard. And I think we're all in for a big treat when this software finally makes it onto our cars. Thank you all so much for watching, and another big thank you to Delete Me for sponsoring this video. Until next time, everybody, bye.